In today's video, we'll be exploring a significant update in the legal battle between the Security and Exchange Commission, the SEC, and Binance, a global cryptocurrency exchange. But before we delve into that, let's first examine a recent hearing that shed some light on the future of digital asset ecosystem. In the recent House Financial Service Committee hearings on the future of digital assets, Representatives Richie Torres and Patrick McHenry made notable statements that emphasized the importance of clear regulations and congressional involvement in shaping the cryptocurrency landscape. Torres raised the fundamental question of who should have the power to decide the fate of emerging technologies like crypto and blockchain. He argued that the United States Congress, being accountable to the people, should play a decisive role, rather than leaving a decision solely in the hands of an unelected bureaucrat like SEC Chair Gary Gensler. Furthermore, McHenry highlighted the lack of clear rules and regulations in the United States compared to other countries. He pointed out that several foreign regulators have proposed new regulatory frameworks for digital assets, which puts the United States at a disadvantage in terms of fostering innovation and protecting consumers.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Before we get to the substantive question of what to do with crypto, we as a country have to answer a more fundamental question. Who among us should get to decide the future of emerging technologies like crypto and blockchain? Should it be Chair Gary Gensler, an unelected bureaucrat who answers only to himself? Or should it be the United States Congress, whose members are elected by and therefore accountable to the people? And so, Mr. Allaire, do you believe, as I do, that an act of Congress would be the most democratic means by which to decide the future of digital assets?
Thank you for the question, Congressman Torres. I do agree, and in fact, the Presidential Working Group specifically asked Congress to act urgently on this matter over a year and a half ago. And so I believe it's critical that Congress does take ball control here.
There are crypto companies like Circle that strive to be compliant with the law, and then there are crypto companies that seem intent on willfully evading the law. And yet Mr. Gensler appears to see no difference at all between the two. He treats them all as one and the same. His enforcement has been indiscriminate in nature, which brings me to the lawsuit against Coinbase. Mr. Garrison, if the SEC sincerely thought that Coinbase was operating an unregistered securities exchange, then why on earth would the SEC approve Coinbase as a public company? Or why would the SEC not at a minimum require Coinbase to disclose its status as an unregistered securities exchange as a material risk to the investing public? Do you see a contradiction between the SEC's 2021 approval of Coinbase as a public company and the 2023 enforcement action against Coinbase?
I do see a contradiction. As part of the filing review process, taking a filing effective under the securities rules requires a public interest finding. Typically, a public interest finding, it's a very loosely defined term, but you might argue that a act by the company that is inconsistent with securities laws, what might be not in the public interest.
And I want to interject, the SEC made the following statement in the Coinbase lawsuit. It said, declaring effective a Form S-1 registration statement does not constitute an SEC staff opinion on or an endorsement of the legality of an issuer's underlying business. So when it comes to S-1 registration, the SEC is asserting that it has no opinion on whether an issuer is complying with the very laws that the SEC is charged with enforcing. That strikes me as strange. It's almost as if, suppose the SEC would approve the mafia as a public company and then say, but we have no opinion on the underlying legality of the business. As a layperson, that just strikes me as absurd. So am I missing something, or?
No, I think that's where the public interest finding comes in, and I think perhaps the other side of that coin is that,
no pun intended, right?
Yes, is that you don't want the SEC to take responsibility for what is in any filing, which is, I think, what's getting at, some of that language is getting at as well.
In an interview with the New York Magazine, Chair Gensler said that everything but Bitcoin is a security. Of the more than 200 listings on the Coinbase exchange, the SEC lawsuit only identifies 13 as unregistered securities. 13 out of more than 200 seems to contradict the Gensler doctrine that everything but Bitcoin is a security. Do you see a contradiction there?
Yes. It would be nice to have clearer insights into what tokens, what digital assets the SEC believes are securities instead of seeing them piecemeal through enforcement actions.
The digital market structure discussion draft provides for a safe harbor, and I see the need for a safe harbor that protects good faith crypto companies from arbitrary and capricious enforcement actions. But what about bad faith crypto companies? How do we prevent bad faith crypto companies from exploiting the safe harbor to prevent legitimate enforcement actions?
So included in the market structure bill are the typical anti-fraud protections that exist in both the securities and commodities laws. So whether a digital asset is sold through the new SEC exemption, the SEC's robust anti-fraud authority would also apply there. And on the CFTC side, if a digital commodity was sold or manipulated in a fraudulent way, the anti-fraud provisions of the CEA would apply as well.
And then a quick question about the applicability of securities law to secondary market transactions. Has there ever been a single statute or a single rule or regulation or a single court case that expressly affirms that the Howey test applies to secondary market transactions?
No.
Are you sure?
To the best of my knowledge, yes.
Are you positive? Okay.
Gentlemen's
My time is expired.
Mr. Garrison, Dr. Sarir, let's start with you. Mr. Garrison, how many foreign regulators have proposed new regulatory frameworks for digital assets?
You're looking at about half a dozen to a dozen,
Okay, including Europe.
including Europe.
And Europe is Europe is far more advanced than we are. Okay.
Yes.
We see venture capitalists now deploying offices, American venture capital firms going there to seek to invest. Are other countries implementing new regulations around digital assets, specific to digital assets?
They are. Whole cloth new regulations.
Okay, and do you think consumers are protected here in the United States by our lack of clear rules?
No, they are not.
Okay. Dr. Sarir, how does the threat of enforcement action stymie innovation and hold back developers from new projects here in the United States?
Lack of clarity around regulations involving the issuance of tokens holds back quite a few innovators from actually residing in the United States, and we're seeing actual people who are active in this field move wholesale out of our borders to other jurisdictions.
And that's been pressure on you to develop your technology overseas, not here in the United States.
Well, I'm very happy to be in the United States myself, but I can see the pressure on other people.
Okay. Now, Mr. Garrison, in terms of the cost structure of potential action, enforcement action by the SEC, what does that look like for a firm? What does that look like? I don't want to get into the book of big law and what they charge, but it's not cheap, right?
It's not. You're hundreds of thousands of dollars and into the millions, depending on the charges.
Okay. So, as I said, we want a purpose-built regime for digital assets, right? We want it, same risk, same regulation. That's the focus. Mr. Sexton, in the draft here, we've said that decentralization is the key. If a digital asset association is associated with a decentralized and functional network, they'd be treated as commodities. Would the CFTC and your organization be able to serve as primary regulators over the digital commodity spot market?
Chairman McHenry, if that's the definition as far as a commodity is concerned, then the CFTC and NFA would be able to implement that definition within and regulate that in the spot market. Yes.
Okay, so over here in the Financial Services Committee, we have securities law protections for consumers. We have consumer protection. That is a key part of our discussions. Is there like-kind consumer protection in the world of commodities?
Absolutely. Everything from segregation, capital requirements, risk disclosures. You monitor the trading that occurs, the exchanges do on the exchanges. It's very similar type of customer protections are in place with regard to retail participants.
Dr. Sarir, about decentralization. What are the features? What are the end goal? What's the end goal state of a decentralized network, a functional decentralized network? What are the attributes of it? Give us some sort of, not your 401 class, maybe your 201 class from your college days.
Simply put, a decentralized network aims to provide a service wherein, even though some of the actors in the system might be what we call Byzantine, they might be acting in an adversarial fashion, the system is still able to maintain its safety and integrity guarantees for all of its users. These networks are more resilient than other computer network systems.
Okay. So we see the Securities and Exchange Commission ramping up their enforcement action. Time for hearings. I would think that has to be some contemplation from our friends over there. What we're trying to build is consensus around changes in law, around a new object, a new asset, a new architecture, new digital architecture. Mr. Garrison, if you have an innovator who wants to set up shop here in the United States, in the world of digital assets, how would you advise them?
I tell them that the laws, the regulations are very uncertain. And often those conversations end with the entrepreneur deciding to either launch offshore or to drop the idea altogether.
So let's pivot to stablecoins. Mr. Allaire, where are you currently regulated? Where's Circle currently regulated?
Circle's regulated in a number of jurisdictions. We're regulated across the United States by state payments and banking supervisors. We're regulated in Singapore as a major payment institution. We're in registration with the French government, and we're also regulated by the FCA in the UK.
Do you comply with anti-money laundering rules here in the United States?
Yes, absolutely. Comprehensive BSA, AML programs, which we've had in place for a very long time.
Okay. Are you licensed in the state of New York?
We have a BIT license in New York, and we're also licensed as a money transmitter in the state of New York.
Okay. Thank you all for your testimony. I appreciate the wide-ranging panel we have here.
Now, let's shift our attention to the ongoing legal battle between the SEC and Binance. A federal judge recently urged the SEC to reach a compromise with Binance, allowing the exchange to continue its operations in the United States while fighting the civil fraud lawsuit filed by the regulator. This development offers a glimmer of hope for Binance, indicating that the judge sees potential for resolution. Furthermore, the judge's decision to not freeze Binance asset provides additional relief for the exchange. However, it's important to keep in mind that the situation will be revisited on Thursday, June 15th, which means that the outcome might only be a short-term win for Binance. What makes this case particularly interesting is the judge's skepticism regarding the SEC's enforcement in regards to the crypto world. The judge criticizes the SEC's approach as inefficient and cumbersome, raising concerns about the regulatory framework and its effectiveness. Now let's analyze the recent events and gauge who gained the advantage today. The dynamic between the SEC, the federal judge, and the representatives during the hearings raised thought-provoking questions about the regulatory landscape for cryptocurrency. It appears that the SEC enforcement actions and regulatory approach face skepticism and challenges. Judge urging for compromise with Binance and decision to not freeze their assets can be seen as a setback for the SEC. Additionally, the judge's skepticism about the SEC regulatory power in the crypto world adds weight to the argument that the SEC's approach might be inefficient and burdensome. Representative McHenry and Torres emphasized the need for clear regulation, consumer protections, and purpose-built framework for digital assets. McHenry's comparison to other countries where more advanced regulatory frameworks are being implemented further calls into question the SEC's approach. And that wraps up today's video. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more exciting updates in the future of crypto. While we must remember that these events are part of an ongoing process, it is evident that today's developments have not entirely favored the SEC. The judge's stance and the representative's concern signals a growing sentiment for a more balanced, clear, and democratic approach to regulating the digital asset ecosystem. If there are any other stories you would like to hear me talk about, please leave them in the comments section below. Take care, spike your hair, and have a wonderful, wonderful day.